Welcome everyone to our fourth and probably our final event in our climate series. We're all very excited to have you here tonight. I'm Ella Cheeseman. I'm ISYCA's new CEO, and thank you everyone for giving up your next hour or so to listen to us. We're really thankful for everyone who's taken the time to be with us because I think everyone's going to get a lot out of this event. So for anyone who's just joined, a few quick housekeeping things. If you want to rename yourself with your first name, your preferred pronoun, and the First Nations country that you are on, if you know it, that would be great. For example, I've got Ella, she, her, and I'm in Canberra, so I'm on Ngunnawal country. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation, but if you want to turn your camera on, definitely feel free to do that if you would like. There will be lots of chances to share your thoughts, ask questions, and talk in smaller groups during the event. So be prepared to have your camera and microphone on at those times if you feel comfortable. We will be recording parts of the event, which the recording has started, for people who couldn't make it here tonight. So if you're not comfortable having your image recorded, you can keep your video off. However, the recording will largely be in speaker mode anyway, so you'll only be able to see who the speaker is in the recording. We won't be recording anything that happens in the breakout rooms. So if you want to share a personal story or experience and don't want it recorded, that's fine. We will have plenty of opportunities to hear your questions throughout the event. So please put them in the chat as we go, or prepare yourself to ask them during the Q&A time at the end. Some of our ISYCA team will be in the chat throughout the event. So we've all got a little star in our name if we're part of the ISYCA team. So feel free to direct message us questions if you have any as we go, and we can ask them for you if you don't feel comfortable to do so. Also, we know a lot of the topics we will be touching on in this discussion can be very personal and maybe distressing. If you have any problems with what's being discussed, please feel free to reach out to one of our team members through the chat and just let us know. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, live, work, and play. So for me in Canberra, it's Ngunnawal and Ngambri land in northeast Victoria, which I'm sure lots of you are tonight. It includes the Waywuru, Dadaroa, Yorta Yorta, Jake Matang, Papangarang, and the Tungarung peoples. We acknowledge that the connection of First people to country and community, and particularly the enormous wealth of knowledge that exists among First Nations Australians about caring for country and living as part of our environment. We would also like to acknowledge that First Nation sovereignty of this land was never ceded. Our event today is about acknowledging the huge challenges we face locally and globally, including the threat of catastrophic climate change. Just give me Sorry, everyone, including the threat of catastrophic climate change. And we know that this influences our health and our mental health in many ways. If you're feeling angry, depressed, frustrated, overwhelmed, or any other response to these challenges, you are not alone. And that's why we're having this event tonight. You don't have to try and deal with this alone either. There are so many strategies and support mechanisms we can use to help us in this time of uncertainty. In a minute, I'll introduce you to our amazing presenter, Billy, who will be helping us talk about the mental health impacts these challenges can have, how we can build our emotional resilience, and where we can go for support when we need it. I'd also like to acknowledge that we wouldn't be able to run these events at all without the support of our amazing partners at the Victoria Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, which I know there are a few adult people here tonight, so thank you so much for coming. We have also had the support of a number of local councils and organisations to promote this event. Okay, so now I would like to introduce you to our wonderful presenter for this evening. Originally a country kid from Esperance, Billy McCarthy-Price is a provisional psychologist finalising her Master of Clinical Psychology degree at Deakin University, which is a huge achievement. Most recently, Billy held the position of Chief Executive Officer of not-for-profit Global Voices, where she provided young Australians with the opportunity to meaningfully engage in domestic and international policymaking. Billy has previously worked in roles at the Department of Defence, Victoria Police, and youth mental health organisation Origin. Billy was a 2020 2020 Fellow of the University of Melbourne's Pathways to Politics for Women's program and named one of the 20 young women to watch in international affairs. In 2021, Billy participated in the prestigious US International Visitor Leadership Program, received a Women's Board Leadership Program scholarship, and became a member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. They're all like incredible achievements. Well done, Billy. This evening, Billy is going to be running us through a range of activities, including explaining some key theories around climate change and mental health, facilitating some breakout room discussions, practicing some mindfulness techniques with us, and taking your questions. She'll also make sure you have a bit of time for movement breaks during her session. If you have any questions for Billy during the program, please put them in the chat or direct message any one of us, and we can address them she can address them at the time or come back to them during the Q&A time at the end. Over to you, Billy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ella. And yes, it's always weird to hear your little spiel back at you, specifically because I feel like we miss all the other things that we didn't get, all the failures, all the things we missed out on, applied for, but didn't pass, all those things. But I'm so excited to be here, and thank you all for coming. I know it can be hard to give up a weeknight, especially now that we are having restrictions easing and there's a lot more going on and everyone's super busy again all of a sudden. But I think this is a really important topic, and hopefully you get a lot out of our session tonight. We are focusing on having more strategies rather than content, and more discussions amongst yourselves in terms of what helps you cope when you are thinking about some of these really big, intense issues. Because we know that the climate crisis is real, that the time is ticking, and that hopefully now that we've had a recent change of government, that maybe that's being taken more seriously. But how to take care of ourselves when all of this stuff's going on and we're trying to live our lives, do uni, work, study, care responsibilities, maintain our own mental health. It can be a really difficult balance. So I know that Ella mentioned that we would be talking about mental health, and when you talk about that, you can't help but be vulnerable and share personal experiences and stories. But I would encourage you to be aware of your safety and the safety of others when we do that, and keep everything pretty high level so we can avoid triggering others. And also, if you are feeling distressed, that's fine. My recommendation is to try and stay around and practice some grounding or breathing exercises, but totally understand if you need to leave, and think about maybe a support person that you can have in mind if you did need to do that, who would be there to help you. And then there's always Lifeline. So in terms of today's topic, I'm not going to focus on the doom and gloom, or I guess go down the rabbit hole of all the different statistics that we can draw out when it comes to the climate crisis, because I'm sure all of you are pretty much aware of them, having some connection to that topic, some passion about it by being here tonight. I guess I wanted to focus a little bit more on the mental health impacts of having something like that hanging over us. And like I said, more specific strategies for helping you get through it. Because we know that mental health is increasingly less stigmatised in the community, and a lot of young people are help seeking and prioritising their mental health. But often we need gentle reminders and nudges to maintain that by doing little things that we hope will help, that I'll share with you tonight. So in terms of young people and mental health in Australia, the last big survey was done in 2015. So the stats are probably a bit off, because we know that in terms of the local, national and global context, a lot has changed since then. And that study was actually run in 2013, and it wasn't all published and sent out until 2015. So what we knew from that study was that 1 in 7 young Australians every year was diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and that of those young people, around 30% experienced multiple disorders. So quite a lot of comorbidity when it comes to mental health. Often if you experience a bit of a decline in your mental health, that attracts other things. And I would guess that that number's probably gone up. So instead of 1 in 7 young people, it's probably hovering more around the Australian average of 1 in 4. In terms of mental health and the climate crisis, what we know is that there are lots of direct and indirect effects that climate crisis can have on our mental health and our stress levels as well. And that for young people, having sustained stress levels during adolescence can impact their vulnerability and the severity and rates of mental ill health as they get older. We've seen recently there's been a lot of direct impacts like climate-related extreme weather events like the cyclones, flooding, bushfires, and we know that that can have an impact on the development of depressive and anxiety disorders, but also traumatic disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder or complex trauma as a result of the experiences that people have during those times. And we know that it's on the rise because we know that there's new terms being developed and shared. So eco-anxiety is something that you may have heard of, climate change anxiety. There's a lot of young people in a lot of the Australian surveys in particular that like Mission Australia do or that Origin do, even Triple J do, where the climate crisis is right up there in terms of their top priorities and the things that are impacting on their mental health. So I guess in essence, the fact that if people are saying that it's impacting their mental health, then we should believe them. We don't necessarily need more statistics than that to validate those concerns and to acknowledge the fact that both the direct and indirect impacts of the climate crisis can affect our health and well-being. And we know that that's the fact for physical health. And so we can draw the parallels between that and mental health. And it's not just the distress that this causes, it's also the other emotions. So a lot of frustration, a lot of feelings of helplessness or loss or guilt even around what's happening in the world and how much impact maybe individuals can have. And that's something that I guess I want to be really cognizant of, the fact that they're really strong emotions and they're really hard to sit with when you're balancing a lot of other things in your life as a young person. So just to honour that. I just wanted to make a point about diagnoses because it's not necessarily something that some people, myself included, don't find them necessarily helpful. Some people can find them quite stigmatising and potentially just arbitrary labels, but other people find them very insightful and very helpful, and there's lots of young people who get a diagnosis and feel like they are seen and that that's really a connection for them, connecting all the dots of their experience. I feel like there's definitely a sense when it comes to the climate crisis that a lot of the symptoms people experience within the different anxiety and depressive disorders are pretty natural and are pretty valid given the impending reality of the planet that we will be facing in the next couple of years. And I think it's not necessarily an abnormal response to be worried about that. So one of the things that I like to look at is the power threat meaning. I'll share my slides now so you can actually have an idea of what I'm saying. So the power threat meaning framework, which has been developed by the British Psychological Society. Can you all see that thumbs up, Ali? Yep, great. The British Psychological Society's developed the power threat meaning framework, and I find it's a really helpful alternative to formal diagnosis. So like the DSM and categories like that, where you have to meet certain criteria to get a level of mental health diagnosis. The power threat meaning framework looks at mental health as a more holistic focus on well-being. And it takes, I guess, the focus off the individual as well and looks more at collective culture. So the premise of it is that we have power in society. All of us have different levels of power depending on our education, our ability to engage in the legal system, the way that we are raised and have economic power based on gender, sexuality, and that all of those things contribute to our perception of threats in the world. And obviously, when it comes to the climate crisis, that's a pretty big threat. And that threat threatens our needs. So our needs for safety and security, our needs for long-term consistency and a better life than other generations is something that young people are really focused on when it comes to the climate crisis, making sure the world's left in a better place than it was previously. And traditionally, young people don't have a lot of power, just as a result of not having enough years on the planet to accumulate it, and also being, I guess, shut out of areas where other people use their power and influence, such as decision-making spaces. So in terms of coping in a way that's not focused on diagnosis and anxiety and depression, being able to acknowledge the power that you hold and being able to leverage that, but also understanding the strengths that you hold as well. So lots of you will probably have really strong social connections, you might have really great self-care strategies, be good at sleeping, be able to feed yourself successfully, all those little things, which are great strengths. And I think when it comes to the climate crisis, solidarity is a huge strength, and being able to build a community of support and influencing that and impacting that can be a really great strength that helps build power. So this, I guess, leads into, well, I would actually just encourage everyone to look at this as an alternate way of thinking about mental health, because I think this has been developed in conjunction with people with lived experience as well, and people who experience mental ill health as a result of lots of different factors, not just trauma, not just biological brain neurotransmitter reasons, but all sorts of reasons. And I guess it makes more sense when you do apply an example like the climate crisis, because it does take that into account. Sometimes when it comes to this work and trying to be proactive and do the right thing and impact the results of what's going on around us in the environment, you can really feel like you're just one person, and a person who cares a lot more than other people sometimes around you, and who is making a lot more effort than other people around you. And I guess part of being able to tolerate the distress that the climate crisis is causing is being able to understand your role within that, and the extent, to bring it back to the power threat meaning framework, your power within that, and the influence that you can have as a result of that power. So we know that it takes individual and collective action to make a meaningful change, and that we can accumulate more power by working with others. And we can leverage our existing strengths like networking, like being a very social person or well-educated person, and work with others so that we're stronger, more united, and we have more power to influence change. Not only short-term, but hopefully long-term, particularly decision-making that occurs. One of the greatest strategies that I can impart on you tonight that hopefully will be helpful when it comes to this idea of managing your distress about the climate crisis, and I guess supporting others to manage it, is reality acceptance, which is a concept that's talked about in a couple of different modalities of treatment that we focus on in psychology. So there's acceptance and commitment therapy, which you might have heard by ACT. And then there's dialectical behaviour therapy, or DBT, which also focuses strongly on reality acceptance. And the primary focus of this is to accept reality as it is, not how we want it to be. And that can be really, really difficult for people with a strong sense of social justice, because the sense of injustice is a real strong driving factor and can actually motivate us for change. And balancing that with accepting the fact that injustice occurs in society and that it's not something that we approve of. It doesn't mean we think it's fair or right or have to agree with it or support it, but we accept that it's there. And this can be really, really difficult for people who want change and want change fast. And when we have the ticking clock of the climate crisis in our ears, reality acceptance can start to go out of the window because we do get so fixated on goals and what we need to do right now. So we need to accept that the future has limits and that everyone is limited by the power that they hold in society. And also that life can be living even when there is pain. So we know that there's different shades of grey within life, and that without some of those darker moments, the lighter moments don't shine so bright. And there's a concept about pain and suffering that we talk a lot about within different therapies, where pain is a reality of the situation. We experience pain as a result of day-to-day living. Things can be painful, things can hurt us. But when we think about it over and over again, when we start to get obsessed with it, when we start to let that impact our present and our future, that's when we start to lead to suffering. And that's when we start to experience a lot of these symptoms, these distressing thoughts, the demotivation, the desire to withdraw, to isolate. That can all come as a result of, I guess, allowing that suffering to take hold of us. And by keeping the reality of the fact that life is painful, but we can get through, and you've got strength and you've got different elements of power within your life to lean on, that's something that's really important. And it feeds into this idea of grounded hope as well, which is a concept that's talked a lot about within sort of the climate crisis circles, is that we have hope for what we can achieve in the next 10, 20, 30 years and how we can affect the planet. And that's grounded in our understanding that the future has limits and that this is the reality that we're living in right now. Again, doesn't mean you approve of it, doesn't mean that there's something that you totally fine with. That's not what acceptance is. It's accepting the facts about the present situation. And it also feeds into this idea of the control paradox, because when we stop accepting reality, we start to think that we can influence things that we don't have control over and stop trying to influence the things that we do have control over. So this can be a hard concept to understand. So I have a few examples here. Have you ever tried, would love a reaction from you all, thumbs up or thumbs down. Have you ever tried to control when you're falling asleep and really slide in bed, focusing on like, yes, I have to fall asleep. I'm trying to fall asleep. I'm focused on falling asleep. Why aren't I falling asleep? What's going on? I feel like it's one of those issues of control paradox, where the more you try and control it, the less control you actually have. Same thing with whether we think about something, say, oh, don't think about that, just don't think about that. And of course it gets bigger and bigger in your brain because you're trying to control something that is outside of your control. Same thing with people who tell you to just don't stress about it, don't worry about it. Trying to control negative emotions is another area where we say that that paradox occurs because you cannot. What you can control is your attention and awareness, and that's developed through mindfulness. And what you can control is the acceptance of reality as it is, and the fact that maybe you are having these negative emotions and being able to sit with those. That's really important too. So I thought we'd do a little exercise building on that about what is within your personal control when it comes to the climate crisis. Similarly, thumbs up or thumbs down. Got some examples here of what is within your immediate and direct personal control. So, for example, riding your bike to school, work or uni to reduce your emissions footprint. Is that within your personal control? Thumbs up or thumbs down. Great. Getting legislation for a formal price on carbon passed through the lower and upper houses. Is that in your direct, immediate control? definitely not. Changing your diet to be less resource demanding. Is that in your direct control? What about negotiating the switch from a coal-fired power station to a renewable energy source in your local area? Is that, yeah. What about taking reusable cutlery and a kit cup to an event to reduce your reliance on single-use items? Great. Borrowing a resource-demanding item off a friend instead of buying one yourself. Securing agreements for aviation and shipping industries to be included in formal carbon calculations. No, unfortunately not. What about setting up and maintaining green waste collection depots across your community? Potentially. Don't know about maintaining it though. But maybe what about arranging a meeting with your local MP to discuss ways to improve recycling options in your electorate? Absolutely. And so this builds into that concept of power and the threat of that power. Obviously, there's this existential threat of climate crisis on the power that you hold in society, and the areas within your personal control are very limited as a result. If you had more power, if you were the one sitting in the negotiating seat when it came to, you know, passing legislation about a formal carbon price through the upper and lower houses, that's very different. But we know that most young people don't hold that amount of power, and that instead of individual action, collective action might be a better, a more sustainable approach to taking to that. All the while maintaining your own personal self-care to get you motivated and sustain your energy to do that stuff. So that's the stuff we'll talk about later in the session. All right, what is it, 6 o'clock now? Time for a stretch break. So do whatever you want. Star jumps, head, belly, tap. I always have to think about that one. Floor is lava, whatever you need to stretch. Let's do it for about 60 seconds. Always makes a big difference. Might do these ones.
Have a little dance if you want to.
Dance hard if you
Sort of
want.
put on some stretch break music or something.
Whoever's on the tram, I hope you're stretching on the bar.
No one wants us to see their stretching.
No, it's like eating. Even though we're all fixated on our own faces when it comes to Zoom, you know, everyone's like, oh, just a bit self-conscious. No thanks. All right, take a nice sip of water. Stay hydrated, please, everyone, as well. Okay. I just wanted to go to Leah's question that she's got here about any tips on how to explain climate anxiety to people who don't feel the same sense of social justice. And I would argue that this is like a part of a broader challenge within, I guess, mental health and well-being across the board, is that often we don't actually have language to describe what that feels like. We don't often have language about why it might be impacting you more than other people, why you care more. There are the people who tell you just to stop worrying, or that like you're putting too much focus on it and maybe you just need to like take a step back. All very invalidating comments, and largely from people I think who are just ill-informed or maybe never had the opportunity or education to learn about some of these ideas. So I would probably break it out and talk more about anxiety as a concept as a whole, about what that looks like. People love examples when it comes to mental ill health. People love to feel, I guess, that idea that behaviours that maybe they did have once upon a time, especially if they're healthy at the moment, if they did go through hard times, they're able to resonate with them, and actually normalises a lot of the experiences, particularly for older Australians and older adults who mental health wasn't a thing. You know, you weren't allowed to feel like that. If you felt like that, you just needed to pull your socks up and keep going. It wasn't really tolerated. We didn't really appreciate what that meant for a lot of people. Whereas now we've got a lot more language around it. We're able to direct people to supports. And when it comes to, I guess, climate anxiety, we can link the concepts of the fact that we do have this existential threat that's impacting our happiness and our way of life, and maybe describing it more in terms of the anxiety you're experiencing is a short-term effect from a really long-term problem, just like for them appreciating the fact that, you know, I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but I'm sure there'll be an example that you could draw down on for them in terms of an area that they may be worried about, and being able to describe the similar sensations and feelings that you experience in your body, in your mind, in your thoughts, and in the way that you might catastrophize about the future. So I think it involves you developing awareness about your level of climate anxiety and what that looks like for you, being able to translate that to someone else, but also maybe just focusing on what they could do to help, rather than them necessarily needing to understand the concept, what you need in that time. Because I think more often than not, people do want to help, and that intention is pure. And just by being clear with what you actually need, whether that's validation or a hug or to be left alone for a little while to simmer down, that can make a big difference. I think primarily just don't get defensive, because the level of understanding about mental health, and I see it all the time, so I'm a bit more aware of it, but it's very bad. It's so bad in the community. It's really not good. Similar to, I guess, you know, people's understanding of the climate crisis and the different things that impact that. It's not just, you know, electric cars or hydrogen that's going to save us, kind of thing. So yeah, I feel that pain, particularly when I try and explain that idea to like my older family members, because their level of understanding about what anxiety even looks like is very different. They think about it within, I guess, an idea of stress, which it's much more deep-seated and long-term than just immediate stresses. So now what we're going to move on to is this concept of the window of tolerance, which I think is a really great way to, I guess, build on what we've just been talking about, being able to explain your needs to other people, but your understanding of where you're sitting yourself. So it is, I guess, it may look a little bit complex now, but we'll work through it together and in breakout groups as well. To have the opportunity to share your experience of the different levels, but also what works for you, because I think that can be the most valuable, is actually sharing some of our coping strategies with others, because lots of people will get brand new ideas or different ways to think about it. So when it comes to the window of tolerance, I guess I want you to, you can close your eyes if you want to, but picture times in your life when you were suddenly intensely angry or frustrated, and then looking back, you don't really recognize yourself or your behavior at all. Or a time when you felt so overwhelmed that you just wanted to disconnect or disappear, or just remove yourself from everyone else, and just cocoon yourself in bed, in your doona, or on the couch, just away from people. Or times when you felt so distracted and unfocused that you can't remember what was actually going on around you at the time. You can't remember, you know, what you were doing or what you ate or what was going on in terms of your friendship groups. All of those moments that came into your mind are examples of times when you were no doubt outside of your window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is going to look different for everyone based on your family history, your health, your well-being, trauma backgrounds. But generally, it's a window of optimal functioning. And it's the window that we try to be in as human beings so that we can regulate our emotions effectively. We can have meaningful connections with other people. We can make rational, sound decisions, and we can feel connected to our environment and to, I guess, more broadly, the universe, where we are within the world. We can problem solve more effectively. We can have those tough conversations that sometimes maybe we get defensive about or overreact about. And we can just respond to all the everyday things in life. So being able to pay your car rego, being able to go to the shops and buy groceries for yourself for the week. All those things are times when you're in your window of tolerance. And we know that the window gets squished, the more stress you experience. And that's when you start to creep into the red zone or the blue zone. I like to call it the Hulk zone or the zombie zone, because a young person I worked with one time suggested that to me, and I thought that was great, and I'll always do it like that from now on. So the hyper arousal and hypo arousal, zombie and Hulk zone, much easier to remember than those very similar words. And so that's when our brain starts to flip outside of the front of it, which is the more modern, newly formed area that allows us all these executive functioning to be able to build tech, spaceships, all the great things, and flips right back into our animal brain, where we just focus on fight or flight or freeze or flail. So you might not have heard of flail or fawn, which is the more recently evidence-based F in the fight, flight or freeze. Flail or fawn is what we call that reaction that you have where you just go along with it. You are unable to make a decision or tolerate anything happening to you, basically, so you just go along with it. And often that's what we see instead of freeze reactions for people who are more appeasing to others. They'll flail or fawn, where they'll just do whatever you want just so you stop. And that's a really common reaction when it comes to trauma as well. So we know that the window is not static. It's like a river. If you think about a river, the flow will change depending on how many obstacles are in its way and the path that it follows. So if your path's getting squished either side, it will narrow and get faster and move more unsteadily than if it's wide and open, like a slow flowing river, where you're doing all your self-care and you're looking after yourself effectively. So what I thought we could do was split off into breakout rooms and talk about what this zone looks like for you. So the Hulk mode zone. Is there things that you do when you're in this zone, when you are feeling particularly angry or anxious or irritated, where things can be really overwhelming and your desire is to fight things or attack things or to run away as fast as you can? It'd be great if you could share what this looks like to you with the other members of your breakout group, particularly when it comes to thinking about the climate crisis and thinking about, I guess, what might make you angry about the indecisions or inaction that maybe is going on. And yeah, just individually, I guess, maybe share a couple of things that this looks like for you. Great conversations in our breakout group. So I hope everyone else had similar ones. What I thought we could do was add to the slide. So add what we shared with each other, if maybe there was one person from each breakout group who wanted to share just a couple of things that came up for them in terms of what Hulk mode looks like. Our group was really efficient and amazing and had quite a number. So I'll read through those because I think lots of those would resonate with you guys. But this idea that there's a lot of tension in your body. So you're feeling like a coiled spring, that it's hard to collect your thoughts and to think clearly, that the brain is just really offline. You're really just reacting in an emotional mind frame rather than a rational mind frame. Feeling frustrated and flustered. And the last one, like a burden on others. So being really, hard on yourself when it comes to dealing with these big emotions. You'll start to notice you become quite abrupt in your speech. The eye contact starts to stop. You start to withdraw within yourself. And you may find that you have to walk away from tough conversations or spend more time away from other people because of how unregulated you're feeling. You worry about your impacts on others. You notice you'll start to get irritated by little things, the things that maybe normally if you were in your window you could just walk straight past, but will add up very quickly when you're outside of it. Those feelings in your body, really feeling that hot, sweaty, flushed face, a lot of the body symptoms that are telling you to fight or flight, and really poor sleep or insomnia. We start to notice that. And that can be a red flag that we're moving outside of our window when we start to notice some of those areas like sleep and diet. So let's add a few more based on what we had, the conversations that you had in the breakout groups. Was there someone who wanted to share from group number 1? If you remember your number.
I don't remember my number.
Let's just say, Ali, your group can be group number 1.
Okay. Well, I was in a group with Jo, Leah, and Anna, I think. Yeah, Anna. And we spoke about crying. I spoke about crying, but there was agreement. And how I just sometimes cry, or not sometimes, but if I'm feeling like my Hulk feelings. And we also spoke about like our stomach dropping and our palms getting sweaty and like those kind of physiological reactions. So that's what our group spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that crying can feel like a real betrayal, especially when we're not feeling sad necessarily, and we associate crying with sadness, when we feel really angry and frustrated. But we know that because of the way our system's wired, that is a very natural response to intense emotions. Your body doesn't necessarily read what specific emotion, it just reads how you're feeling and displays that and then reacts. Yeah, great one. Other group, I believe we were group 2, so the next group was probably group 3.
Let's go maybe Charlie's group.
Yeah, so I was with Kylie, Katie, and Shishan. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. And we kind of spoke about, like, in relation to climate change, we kind of feel like we go into the Hulk mode a lot when we feel like we're doing what we can to stop the problem, but we're the only ones and we can't see like anyone else doing it. It makes us feel really like angry at other people and like we're not having any effect. And we also said that when we get into this feeling, we either need to like remove ourselves from other people, or we tend to kind of lash out and just get mad at everyone, even if they're trying to help us or not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't, it begins to be something that you can't handle those interactions with other people as effectively because you are feeling such simmering resentment quite often because of that injustice, because you are feeling like you're the only one who cares enough about this, who's doing enough about this. Yeah, I think that would resonate with a lot of people.
And then it's Bridget's group, the last group.
Thanks, Alan.
I was in a group with Dee and Tash, and we talked about not so much feelings of anger, but just feelings of being really frustrated and just that uncomfortable feeling of frustration. Like Tash was saying, it's like your skin crawling or like bugs under your skin and just feeling really helpless, but stuck on that thought and ruminating on that thought, but not being able to do anything. And yeah, that like worry, hopeless kind of feeling, but feeling really frustrated at the same time.
Yeah, definitely that sense of being really revved up about those things, not being able to get past them, getting stuck on them. Absolutely. And you'll start to notice if your mind is ticking over the same thing, you're starting to move outside your window. You're starting to move into those areas of dysregulation either side, and depending on your emotional state, it will make a difference sort of what side of the window you're moving out of. Yeah, great. lots of excellent things there, and lots of things that are really normal when you move outside of that area, and things like everyone has been able to share, universal when it comes to what this looks like when you are feeling in the Hulk mode, when your emotion regulation is really low, and when you're starting to be overloaded by these different ideas, a sense of feeling like you're the only one, or that injustice is occurring. So let's save that and move on. Yay, to zombie mode. So similarly, we'll break off and have a quick discussion about what this zombie mode looks like for you. But this is often when we start to experience distress in a way that makes us withdraw, that slows us down, that makes us feel more spacey, all of the, I guess, more of what you would traditionally associate with depression or depressive symptoms, where you do feel like that real demotivation to act. And when it comes to the climate crisis, this can occur really regularly, just like that sense of injustice, feeling the Hulk mode, this sense of hopelessness, feeling zombie mode. So if we can break out and talk about what that looks like for us, and then come back soon.
Oh, I've mixed up the groups a little bit from last time, so you can talk to some different people.
Excellent, thank you, love it. So onto it, love it. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen again. Similar to last time, group I was in, so many great suggestions, a lot of different experiences, but primarily this desire to isolate yourself, to withdraw, to stop replying to people's texts, to stop going out to events, and not even getting out of bed. A lot of what's the point? For me, we talked about less showering, and for me, a big red flag that I know I'm creeping out of the window is when I stop washing my hair, or go a lot more days between hair washes. That's a really big red flag for me that I go, oh, I've got to start paying more of attention. And for others in the group, that was the things like stop cooking nourishing meals for themselves, stopping exercise, or doing the self-care activities or enjoyment activities that give your life meaning. And then a lot of getting stuck on thoughts. So those spiraling thoughts, catastrophizing about the future, particularly when it comes to the climate crisis, what that's going to look like, but also a lot of regret and frustration about the past and decisions that weren't made and choices that weren't made there as well. And once you get into that cycle, it can be really hard to break out of it. What else? What did group number 1 think?
Bridget's group.
We spoke about a lot of similar things there too, but we also spoke about feeling like really, really fatigued. And also we noticed that it's much harder compared to the Hulk phase to kind of pick yourself up out of the zombie phase. It's not easy to like calm yourself down from being really anxious and in that really high, hyper aroused state, but it's so much harder. And it's, Becky made a good point how it's called the low energy state, but it takes so much energy to kind of pull yourself back up out of that phase to get out of it.
Yes, 100%. And we was talking about that too, and how it's like quicksand. It really sucks you in, it pulls you in, and often the only way out of it is through other people and the support of other people to help pull you out of that quicksand, because it's so hard to do by yourself. Whereas the Hulk mode you often cycle in and out of can be easy to try and catch yourself on the down, whereas once you're down, stuck in zombie mode, it's really sticky.
As you said there, that spiral idea, that resonates a lot with me and with a few people I was talking to, I think. And for me, it's the guilt feeling in that spiral and getting stuck in the guilt about not feeling like you're not doing anything, but then you feel miserable, so you don't do anything, and then you feel more guilty, and it just perpetuates. Ella, your group.
We actually spoke about how I don't know if this is already in the list, but we can't focus on what we need to be focusing on, and our list of things to do grows, and our ability to tick them off just gets smaller and smaller. And yeah, we also spoke about how time seems to pass by, but we do the same thing every day without really noticing that it's, I mean, it's a bit somber to say without really noticing, but you just, your day's the same, in and out. Weekends and weekdays are the same, and all of a sudden a month's gone and it's gone. So we sort of spoke about how that's like that kind of sluggishness sort of characterizes the zombie phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And like such a powerful, I guess, description of when we start to live a life that doesn't provide us with meaning, where the day-to-day is largely the same, or we're not paying attention to it, we're not being mindful of the present. We're either getting pulled into the past or we're getting pulled into the future. It's really difficult to stay in the current moment, because it is so uncomfortable when we're feeling like this, and our tendency is to avoid discomfort as humans, and having those day-to-days where we don't really notice what's going on around us because we are withdrawing and potentially dissociating is really a powerful and key characteristic of this zombie mode. What about for others?
Charlie's group, I think it's the last one.
Yeah, we just said that like we tend to feel really tired and we just want to like retreat to our rooms and just lie in bed all day, and like no matter how much sleep we get or whatever, we just can't like break that feeling. And like things that people ask us to do or tasks that we need to do that we normally can do easily, even when we're doing so much more, just feel like really overwhelming, and they just take us so much more time than normal.
Yeah, and those feelings of overwhelm, and that can lead us to feeling like we're not achieving as much as we normally do, and those self-judgments and criticisms can come out, like, why can't I used to be able to do this so easily, what's going on, God, I need to get better. And that can lead to those really unrealistic expectations that we can have of ourselves when we are in the zombie zone, because we aren't able to function very successfully. We are frozen, or we're just going through the motions, we're just flailing. All right, thanks guys for sharing. I think that paints a really strong picture, particularly as we touched on in terms of how we can feel about this coming up for us, in the zombie phase coming up for us when it comes to thinking about climate crisis and getting stuck in these moments. Less so the injustice coming out, and more so the guilt about maybe not doing enough, or not being motivated, or being actually able to focus on doing enough because you are stuck in that really low zone. I will stop. Wait, no, I'm going to move on here. Let's move back into presenter mode, because that might be easier. Great. So I guess when it comes to all of this, I want to highlight the fact that it's really normal for your window of tolerance to decrease during stressful times. And the climate crisis creates stress for all of us. But there's been a number of significant stresses in the last 2 years that the COVID-19 stuff, regardless of how impacted or not impacted you felt like you were, definitely would have increased that. Recent election may have increased that for you. Personal struggles, all of those things might have shrunk your normal window of tolerance. And you might feel like it's smaller because you're noticing that things that maybe didn't bother you before are starting to bother you, or you're finding it harder to get motivated to do the things that maybe used to bring your life meaning, or you used to be passionate about. And I think it's important to be kind to yourselves when it comes to this, and that self-judgment and criticism are only going to get in the way of growing your window. We know that that shrinks your window. So definitely normal in the current context. So what helps? What we want to do is start to transform some of those ineffective coping strategies that we develop as a result of going into the Hulk or zombie modes, like your disengagement, your avoidance, your emotional suppression, into effective coping strategies that allow you to address your emotions directly and be a lot more proactive with your problem solving. So when you start to notice these red flags and you start to creep outside of your window, you're better able to jump on them. So soothing, I think we'll just stay as a big group for these ones, if that's all right. What helps to soothe you when you are stuck in Hulk mode? What can be beneficial? I think if you just raise your hand and we can go through, might be easier. Or should we still go breakout groups? Are everyone happy with the breakout? I liked it, but I don't know. Thumbs up if you're happy to go into a breakout group and talk about what helps soothe you when you're in these Hulk modes. Yeah, let's stick with that then. Is that all right, Ali?
Just give me 2 seconds and explain what we're doing in them while I'm resorting. Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll break out into breakout groups, and what would be ideal is if you could talk about the things that you do when you're in the Hulk zone to get out of it, so to get back into your window of tolerance. So the things that will help soothe you when you are feeling that fight or flight. Oh, I struggle so hard, my little L's, my little tongue can't get around it, but anyway. So it might be listening to music that's calming and soothing. It might be moving your body and doing really intense exercise. Things like that you do to help soothe yourself, to pull yourself out of that Hulk zone when you might be getting those feelings of injustice, about you're the only one who's ever doing anything about climate change in your family, someone bloody threw out the compost again, all those kinds of things. What helps bring you back down? That didn't have time. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So we had a few that I'll share with you, and we can build on them as well. But yes, very conscious of time. I knew that time would fly because we're having fun, but I didn't realise quite how quickly. So thank you, Ali, for keeping me honest when it comes to this. So for soothing, we had cuddles with pets, which is something that comes up every single time I talk about these kinds of activities. Cuddles with pets. Pets can be so therapeutic and really grounding for us. And as well, getting into nature. So if your pet allows you to do that, if not, getting into nature can be a really great way to remind you of your connection with a broader purpose, a broader universe, but also release that tension that you notice as soon as you're in a natural environment. You do start to relax and relinquish some of that distress. And music, very controversial one, because for some people, a soothing way for music when you're in that Hulk phase can be like upbeat, really intense music, which for me is the opposite of what I need, but similar to TV shows or entertainment, things like that. Depending on you and what you prefer, that makes a big difference in knowing what you'll reach for. So if Grey's Anatomy soothes you, I don't know how, but so many people it does. The drama, honestly, I couldn't cope.
But I feel attacked right now.
all the clients of mine all talk about Grey's. If that's the thing that suits you, then go for it. If that's the thing that activates you, go for it as well if you're getting out of that zombie mode. Some of the zombie mode things we had was some very light exercise, so just going for a walk or doing some yoga. Cleansing yourself and your space can be a really powerful thing to feel like you're starting to get out of that zombie mode, and choosing one thing at a time. So getting really laser focused and being able to achieve just a few single things to start building that momentum to get out of the zombie zone. Lots of different things, practicing gratitude, focusing on the positives. That can be really hard to do when you're feeling like shit in zombie mode, but one of the things I guess you can start to focus on is just a couple of things that you do have control over and are grateful for. Did anyone want to jump in just with a couple from their group? Or are you happy?
Maybe just any group that feels like they had any that weren't
that maybe
on there. Ella?
Yeah, well, we spoke about routine and trying to get back into a routine and how powerful a routine is when you're feeling low or sluggish.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely one to think about as well when it comes to this broader window of tolerance. What we know can maintain it are all of these things over here. So routine, having a routine for your sleep, having a routine for your diet, medication, exercise and self-care, building it in so you don't have to think about it, because we know the brain isn't really operating in the best way when we're outside of the window. Being able to maintain a routine takes the guesswork out of it, but also reduces the effort that it takes. And social connection. So it's something that I heard you all talk about when it came to getting out of the zombie zone, but social connection can be something that maintains our window of tolerance, because we are social beings, and being able to connect, even if it is just validation from other people about how hard you're trying, or all the things that you're doing to try and address climate change in your environment and within your locus of control, that can be really powerful too. And then never underestimate the power of spiritual connection, however that looks like for you, whether that's formal religious practice or going for a walk on the beach every day or doing some mindfulness and connecting to the broader universe, whatever it looks like, that can really help get us out of our funks and balance us out, expand that window. And professional supports. So before we finish up, I wanted to touch on professional supports, because I feel like this is something that is another really practical thing that you can do to help yourself. There's different options depending on how old you are, but everyone in Australia can go and see their GP, talk about their mental health and get a better access plan, which allows you 20 sessions with a psychologist. There generally is a gap that you have to pay, but if you can find a psychologist before you go in and request them as part of your referral, that can be really useful if they bulk bill. Local headspaces service young people up to 25 and is probably a better funded way to do it, because generally they are bulk billed and they won't charge you for the gap. And with your mental health access plan, you can access headspaces, but there's also other treatment options that they offer. So getting in touch with your local headspace is a really great thing if you're eligible to be able to access support, and generally it's really good support and it's really affordable. I am doing a shout out to my old organisation that I used to work for, Origin, who have developed a platform called Most, which is a series of online modules that you can work through by yourself that helps develop your own understanding about anxiety and depression, how it impacts your life and the things that you can do, but also offers a platform where you can chat with other young people and other people generally who are using the platform, and speak with peer support, so people who are also trained, experienced, lived experience representatives who can, I guess, just normalise and help you work through what you would like if you'd like to connect with other people. And then community support groups. So when, I guess, breaking it back out to climate change specifically, there's lots of online and face-to-face groups where you might be able to get the support that you are looking for when it comes to that collective action, that collective sense of maybe rage or guilt or injustice. And I would strongly encourage you to think about groups like this, running this event, and different ways of connecting with like-minded people who will be able to validate you a lot better than some of your family or friends who might not really get it. And I think that helps build that power, builds those strengths, and helps you connect with people who you could work together to, I guess, achieve more within, I guess, that collective idea that we talked about earlier. So that's it. That's all I have. In terms of slides, we did have a few strategies, and we'll share the slides with you because we saved all your great brainstorming ideas. But there's a couple of, I guess, more formal self-soothing strategies, soothing strategies and activating strategies that you could give a go. And I will put in details in the slides so that you can practice those by yourself.
Does anyone have any questions that they want to channel at Billy? I know we're at the time, but anything we really need to ask while she's here? We've got her.
Yeah, any burning questions? I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. Sorry, I feel like I mismanaged my time there, but it was such good discussion.
It was me. I was the one opening and closing breakout rooms.
Well, I hope it was helpful for everyone, and that you are at least a little bit more self-aware about how you function outside of your window, but also ways that you can get back into it if you're feeling a little bit like maybe you're out of it, and some of those red flags for you that start to tell you that you should listen to.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this session, Billy. I found it very insightful, and I really enjoyed the breakout rooms and hearing other people's strategies and how they felt. For anyone here tonight, if you know anyone who couldn't make it and would find this useful, we've recorded the session and it will be up on our YouTube channel, so we can send out the link and anyone can access it. Thank you all so much for coming and giving up an hour of your night for this amazing session. And if you're someone who has been here throughout our climate series, thank you so much as well. Your support is honestly so incredible to us. A bit of a side note, ISYCA is going through a complete transformation at the moment. We're looking to expand and grow. So if you're a young person wanting to join our team or know of anyone who might be interested in joining our team, please get in touch with us via Instagram, Facebook, email, anything. We'd really love to chat. We'd love to take on some new team members. Anyone from the Northeast Victoria, it doesn't have to be Indigo Shy, anyone from the Northeast, please get in touch with us because we're looking to grow. Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors and partners who make events like this possible. So DELP, and I know there was a few DELP people here tonight, the local councils and organisations. We couldn't do any of this without you. Yeah, thank you so much for your support. And don't forget, everyone, to look after your own mental health, check in with the people around you, and know that you can always reach out if you need it. Thanks so much for a lovely evening, everyone, and go and enjoy your nights.